present here to brief you about the outcome of the Assembly. I would like to introduce to you Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, WHO Director General, Ms. Precious Matsoso, co-chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, co-chair of the Working Group on Amendment to the AHR, and Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director, WHO Emergencies Program. We have, as I said, several other experts that I will introduce in due time. Now, over to you, Dr. Tedros, for your introductory remarks.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today, the nations of the world made history at the World Health Assembly. After 2 years of negotiations, they adopted a strong package of amendments to the international health regulations based on the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. The IHR was last updated 19 years ago. The amendments adopted today strengthen global preparedness, surveillance, and response to public health emergencies, including pandemics. And although the pandemic agreement has not yet been finalized, the Health Assembly has charted the way forward. It has agreed to extend the mandate of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body to finalize negotiations on the pandemic agreement as soon as possible, and by next year's World Health Assembly at the latest. The success of the IHR amendments demonstrates that in our divided and divisive world, countries can still come together to find common cause and common ground. In addition to the IHR amendments, Member States also approved the 14th General Program of Work, the Global Health Strategy for the next 4 years. And we also launched the WHO Investment Round, which aims to mobilize the flexible and predictable funds needed to implement that strategy. A number of countries have already pledged their support and have started contributing. Member States also adopted resolutions on antimicrobial resistance, climate change and health, infection prevention and control, maternal, newborn and child health, mental health in emergencies, social participation in primary health care, transplantation, and more. The theme of this year's World Health Assembly was All for Health and Health for All. This week, WHO's member states have embodied that theme. They have worked together to find a shared approach to shared threats. Of course, they don't always agree. That's to be expected. But they're united in their commitment to the vision they had when they created WHO 76 years ago. The highest attainable standard of health for all people as a fundamental human right. Thank you, and Fadila, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. I would like now to open the floor for questions from journalists, starting with Laurent Sierot from ATS. Laurent, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the press conference. Congrats. And first to the DG. So you said tonight to the member states that you believe they will probably not need the full additional year to get an agreement. How important was it to have a deadline, an additional deadline? Because some member states seem to be in favor of a more open-ended format. So how important was it to keep the momentum? And if I may quickly to Dr. Bloomfield, we could hear tonight some member states dissociate already from the amendments that were approved. How problematic would be not to have a universal full implementation of the provisions that were agreed? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Bloomfield.
The first thing is to just acknowledge and celebrate the fact that some very significant amendments to the international health regulations were agreed and adopted by consensus. And then we heard a small number of countries making statements that really were stating their position in that they were going to take the time to review the amendments and then determine what their position was on them. This is built into the international health regulations. But I think it's also worth pointing out we then had a great number of interventions from member states expressing their strong support for this updated package of IHR. The key thing here is, of course, we want, and this is the strength of the IHR, that they are universal, and it would be important for their ongoing relevance and, of course, their ongoing effectiveness that as many member states as possible sign up to them. The key point here is they are an opt-in legal instrument, and all member states are part of the new amendments and are signed up to them unless they express reservations. Based on the work we did this week, I'm very confident that the great number of states parties will follow up and remain committed.
Thank you, Dr. Broomfield. Dr. Ryan?
Just to clarify on Steve may wish to add, I believe only one member state today, this evening, actually dissociated from the IHR. Two member states stated what is the process now that will happen in many member states, is that national parliaments will look at these agreements and ensure that they're endorsed within the context of local, national and domestic law. So that was really a statement of existing fact. And one member state dissociated from some of the IMB processes. So it's a remarkable achievement beyond the consensus that was achieved that only a single member state dissociated itself from the IHR. And in a world that's geopolitically split and divided, that's a remarkable level of consensus over an instrument that DG has said is more than a piece of paper. This is a life-saving instrument, and we thank the member states for their commitment to continue working in this wonderful multilateral way.
Yeah. And then on the other question on the IMB, of course, there were suggestions to make it open-ended, to finalize. But finally, they have agreed to set a deadline. Actually, the negotiation on IMB has also progressed very well. They're very, very close to reach an agreement. And many believe that it can be done within this year, within 2024, if possible. But if not, the deadline set is by May 2025. And I believe, and we believe, this is enough to reach a deal. But having a time frame was really important and accepted by all member states. And that's how they will proceed from here. But Precious, if you'd like to add to this, would be.
Yes, indeed. There was actually a spirit of pragmatism and realism in that, like most of them have said, that they want a pandemic agreement as soon as possible, but it has to be a good one. It has to be a good one, and it has to actually be achieved and agreed to before the end of the year. But there's also a recognition that for quality work and for a quality pandemic agreement, they really need to carefully study the agreement articles that have already been agreed to and ensure that these are not reopened, but also those that have not been completed, to go back and spend time and build confidence amongst themselves and agree and ensure that these can be finalized by the end of the year. I think there's a balance between pragmatism as well as urgency. They recognize that this has to be done urgently, as soon as possible, but while being pragmatic and realistic.
Thank you all. I would like now to invite John Cohen from Science to ask the next question. John?
Thanks so much. Can you explain what the pandemic emergency declaration will do that a fake doesn't already do? And I had a second question for Ms. Matsoso. I think there's a perception that the main stumbling block is how much wealthy countries are expected to provide in exchange for having access to pathogens. Is that how you would characterize it? And if not, what is the main stumbling block?
So just a comment from me regarding the pandemic emergency, and this is one of the big achievements, I think, from a technical perspective in the updated regulations, that there is agreement on this definition of a pandemic emergency. It is a type of fake in the sense that it already will be a public health emergency of international concern, but there are these additional criteria that are laid out in the definitions in Article 1 of the health regulations. And what's distinct is that this is an outbreak or a fake that has got a global impact. It is starting to impact societies. It is impacting or has already impacted on and compromised health systems, and is really creating a great deal of disruption. So in addition to meeting the fake criteria, there are these other criteria, and the idea is that is to give a signal, to give a warning, to declare it before it becomes a full-blown pandemic. So actually action can be taken, including international action, global action, to head it off turning into a full-blown pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Brisket.
Looking at this and all these esoteric definitions, but a pandemic, in all our lives, we have different levels of alert in our lives. We have a risk or a threat to us that's far away, and we have a risk that's very close to us. If my house is in a forest and the forest is on fire, but my house is not yet burned down, it is an emergency even though my house isn't burning. And I think this pandemic emergency concept gives the Director General, with the Emergency Committee, the mechanism and the tools, and thank you Ashley and the team for providing that, the mechanism and the tools to characterize a particular fake as having specific characteristics, John, of spread and intensity and virulence and impact on our society that allows the Director General to raise that alarm and say, the house is burning, or even if the house isn't burning, it may burn down very, very quickly. Tedros tried to do just this at the end of January and February in 2020. But such a definition did not exist, and he spoke to these issues many times. So we do believe that future Director Generals will have a better instrument at their disposal, and the world will take action in a more systematic and fundamentally comprehensive way in the face of the next pandemic. So it really does, in my view, offer the world, the member states, and the DG in their service a characterization of an event that allows a much more intense, speedy, and comprehensive response to be put underway in the face of an imminent developing pandemic.
Ms. Matsuzo, anything to add?
Yes, well, I mean, from what we've seen in these negotiations, I do not think that the big countries are blocking anything. Like I said, it's a question of confidence building and building trust. Because if you start from a trust deficit, it's a process where you start building trust firstly between different member states. But what we've also seen over a number of months is that some countries started by not understanding the context in which we're operating, particularly concerns about equity that other countries have, experienced inequities, and from that level to also recognizing that actually they could come up with proposals on set-asides, for instance. They started from saying it wasn't possible, it couldn't be done, from also coming up with, ranges on percentages that actually they could have set-asides of 0 to 20%, but it's a process, of course. We have also had an opportunity to engage different stakeholders with different views, but increasingly with engagement and dialogue, we're beginning to see convergence, and this is improving, communication between different member states. And I'm quite hopeful that this will improve as we progress towards, finalization of this agreement.
Thank you so much. I would like now to invite Christophe Vogt from AFP to ask the next question. Christophe?
Hello. Thank you for taking my question. It was a little bit the same than my colleague from Science. How do you the negotiations on INB have been going on for like more than 2 years, and I can see that you're telling us that the gap seems to be bridged, but I would like to know what for you is the main point of contention, and how do you think the gap between negotiators can be bridged? Thank you.
Well, I mean, the first one we all know about. I mean, intellectual property has been an area of discontent and disagreement for years, and increasingly, I mean, some countries are beginning to look at a possible language that could be acceptable to all. Over the years, we know that there are provisions about Doha declaration. We know there are agreements about the TRIPS flexibilities. But as to how these apply and their relevance to this pandemic agreement, I think is what is crucial. But because of what already exists elsewhere, it's something that we can use. We can learn from previous experiences, from other disease areas, and I think these can be lessons that can be applied. We've seen flexibilities in how best a language can be found that can help us improve equity and also access. And I'm hopeful that even with research and development, those areas where there were gaps, possible funding and public funding in particular for research and development, there's agreement there. We are seeing improvements in the manner in which member states have accepted some of these provisions.
Thank you so much. I would like now to invite Priti Patnaik, Geneva Health Files, to ask the next question. Priti, you have the floor.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for making time at this hour, and congratulations to all of you. I had quick questions. One is, when will the amendments adopted today, when will it come into force? We've been told about the interlinkages between the IHR and the pandemic agreement processes. And now that the amended IHRs have been adopted, what does it mean for these interlinkages to take shape in the pandemic agreement? And one final thing on if you were to be asked on whether the amendments operationalize equity, what provisions can you point us to? Thanks a lot.
Priti, Steve Solomon, who is our principal legal officer, will take this question. Thank you.
Thanks. Priti, thanks for the question. Yeah, your question on adoption is well timed, because the event that occurred at the Health Assembly tonight in adopting the amendments to the international health regulations doesn't happen very often. And it's important to be clear about what it means and what it doesn't mean. What it means is that 194 countries agreed by consensus on improving the 2005 international health regulations. It does not mean that these improved amendments apply legally right away. What it means is it starts a process at the domestic level, where every country goes back and considers for itself in each country whether these amendments make sense for that country, as Mike said, in terms of their national and international considerations. So adoption begins the process, and that process respects the sovereign right of each country to decide for itself to accept or to opt out of these international rules. With respect to your question about when will it come into force for those countries which decide that it makes sense for them, the answer is it will come into force in 12 months from the notification of their adoption. So very soon after this event, adopting the amendments, the Director General will notify formally all countries, as to this event. 12 months from that point, it will come into force for those countries which decide in their sovereign capacity that it makes sense for them. I hope that answers the question pretty. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for the question, Priti. So on the second question you asked, there are two elements I can point to in particular of the amendments that really do put equity into operation. So yes, we've captured equity and solidarity in the principles. That's no small thing to get that agreement. But if you look at Article 13, it now has very concrete provisions about access to relevant health products and supporting, in particular, developing countries and accessing those health products. And the second element, and this was a really key point, and both of these link also to the discussions in the INB process, but the second one was around mobilising financial resources. And in particular, there's a new article that establishes a coordinating financial mechanism that gets up and going as part of the international health regulations, so it can get going quite quickly. And then in the resolution adopted, there's provision for any new instrument, for example, the future pandemic agreement, to also utilise that mechanism to help mobilise financial resources for all countries, in particular for developing countries.
Thank you, Dr. Bloomfield. I would like now to call on Kerry Cullion from Health Policy Watch to ask the next question. Kerry?
Thank you so much, and congratulations to all of you. I just wanted a little bit of clarity about whether the INB Bureau will continue as is, with all the members. Is that going to carry on? And then maybe if you could have comment on, while all of this was going on, outside there were these very strange protests with these anti-vaxxers and buses going around and so on. What is the WHO and what are the member states actually going to do to tackle disinformation more effectively? Thanks.
Bureau, each member of the ANB Bureau is elected from the regional offices, and based on that, it's up to the region actually whether they would like to have them rotated or to come back, and I think it's on those grounds that if there's any rotation, it would be the prerogative of the region.
Thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Mahjour.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add on what Dr. Masuso said, that the resolution adopted by member state today offered the possibility of the region to, if they wish, to replace their representative in the Bureau, while the resolution has extended the role of the ANB as a whole. Then this is extremely important because we are not going to start from scratch. It will be continuity on the work, especially like Dr. Masuso said, on the already agreed text. It's important to keep it, build on it, and solve the outstanding issues.
Thank you, Dr. Mahjour.
I think you were referring to some of the events today of the protests in town. If there's one thing Dr. Tedros has taught me, is this organization has become one that celebrates diversity. We celebrate differences of opinion. We value all voices. And we want to hear all voices, because all voices matter. That is what the essence of democracy is. We don't shut down dialogue. We don't try to silence people. But what we want is a debate that's based on the facts, a debate that's based on good information. Challenging power is always a good thing. Challenging those who have it is always a good thing. But we need to have a respectful debate. We need to look at the value of things, and we need to look at the risks that any decision we make in our society poses. National legislators, international legislators know that, and they have to do that all the time. So when we have a society like is in Switzerland, where those who disagree with the process can gather and protest against it, we should celebrate that. We should not reject that. What we should do is reject those who will manipulate that, those who will poison that debate, those who will introduce falsehoods into that debate and use it for their own personal gain, or ask people to sign up and pay for the pleasure of supporting that particular movement. So I think all citizens should question when new policy emerges. You saw it today. Even our member states want to go and look at this legislation. They're acting on behalf of many millions of people, and they want to check and make sure. Tedros uses the word check very often. He says sometimes people need to check. They need to be comfortable. So I don't think tonight we should be focusing on that. What we should be focusing on celebrating is the fact that the world has taken a big step forward. We should recognize that there are people who need to be brought on that journey, who don't fully trust these processes. That doesn't mean we should shut down the dialogue. That means we need to intensify our dialogue. We need to bring society with us, and we need to recognize society is diverse. We spent many days this week talking about how we respond to differences in our society, how we respond to gender, how we respond to what is different about us, and what is different between us is what is special about us all. So I think tonight I would just say we should be happy that all voices around this process are heard, and that we want a strong, robust, engaged and respectful dialogue that leads us towards a treaty that will protect billions of people into the future, and as Tedros said today, protect our grandchildren, our children and our grandchildren into the future. So I think that's what I'd like to say about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know that Dr. Bloomfield needs to.
I'm sorry, I'll just have to excuse myself. One is I'm a bit short on sleep, but I have to get to my hotel before midnight, or I'll have nowhere to stay tonight. So, and believe me, I need somewhere to stay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the team who worked tirelessly with us to support this great achievement. It really is historic. Thank you.
So we're closing.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Antonio Brotto to ask the next question. Antonio from EFE.
Thank you, Fadela. So allow me to change the topic because I want to know about other developments on the Assembly. And I particularly wonder if the WHO members have been able to adopt by consensus the decision concerning the health situation in Palestine, the amendments presented by Israel first and then by Arab countries. Was it necessary a voting? Do you have the results of the voting, or there was consensus? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio. I will invite Derek Walton, legal counsel, to take this question. Mr. Walton?
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question. Yes, indeed, we've had a number of items concerning different situations considered by the Health Assembly much beyond the IMB and the international health regulations. There were in fact two substantive two substantive items which concerned the health conditions in the occupied Palestinian territory. One of them was a resolution under our item 20, which was adopted by a vote following a number of votes on individual amendments which were presented. So we had a series of 5 votes dealing with that item. 4 of the amendments were adopted, and the resolution was eventually adopted overall. There was a second resolution. I should say that resolution also dealt with the occupied Syrian Golan. There was a more specific resolution which was also adopted, again following a vote, dealing with the situation relating to Palestine following the situation last October, and that, as I say, was also adopted by a vote. So we had 2 separate resolutions covering the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, as I say, both adopted by votes.
Thank you so much. I would like to invite any of our speakers if you have something to add. If not, we have come to an end to our press conference. Anyone wants to take the floor? If not, Over to you, Dr. Tedros, for your closing remarks.
Thank you, Fadila. First of all, I would like to thank the press corps for joining us at this very late hour. Thank you so much. And I would also like to thank Precious and Ashley for your leadership and this very historic milestone. So see you next time in our regular presser. Good night. Bye-bye.